But I don't usually do this. I have this one piece of jewelry. I've had it for 30 years. It's not the only thing that I wear.
So I think we're
Oh, okay.
live, just FYI. No, you do not have to do that. Okay, okay. Oh, wait.
Recording in progress.
So if you are logging in with a computer, make sure you mute.
I am the, did you hear? I'm the only one that did that. I went back and I did a correspondence. I'd work for you. Who was that woman that's the town attorney? I will say the new secretary every week is updating the links to the committee meetings. And there was new signing instructions. She is a keeper.
Oh, you're talking about the town clerk?
That's the new clerk. Very, I mean, write her a lovely note, so how interesting. Woman.
Yeah, I was wondering, they don't do those summaries anymore, the town council meetings? I think the old town clerk was the one writing them. Or doing it?
Yeah, there has to be a summary. I mean, it's in there.
Do they still issue those? I was just thinking the other day, I haven't seen one since Melissa.
I know I have seen it. I know I've seen a summary. Maybe you're not signed up for the right thing.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
You signed up for so many things, that's it.
Yes.
Well, that's, sometimes I unsubscribe.
I think it actually may even go out in the newsletter. Okay. Anyways, do call me if you can bear one more person's advice to you about knee surgery because, well, no, you don't have to. Never mind. If you need anything, call me. That's really good.
Do you know if Fred Taylor's coming?
I don't know. No one tells me anything.
And we have an in-person person. You want to wait till the meeting starts? Welcome, whoever you are. Don Phelps?
It's all I live for. It's all I live for is this committee and responding to emails at 11 o'clock at night. Okay, so it is 4 o'clock. I'm going to start the meeting. And for those of you that are on Zoom, one of our members, Wanda Jenner, is sitting in the front row. So she's a little farther away from people, but she is in the room. So we have a full house. So we have all our members here. Okay. So I'm going to call this meeting to order. Do I need to do a roll call if I counted everyone? Do we need to technically call it out? Okay. D.
Here.
Okay, Nona.
Here.
MJ.
Here.
Wanda. And I am here. I'm Jennifer. Okay, so do we have any oral communications for items not on the agenda? Okay, we do not. Okay, I'm going to, yes.
I do have one. I just wanted to mention that I attended a CAL FIRE meeting yesterday, and they were saying that there's a law under work or in process where they're trying to make it so that Zoom participants will be allowed to be part of the quorum. So I have no idea when that's going to happen, but I think that'll be nice for when people can't attend in person. I just thought I'd mention that.
I read about that a few months ago, and it's still working through, and there's also a lawsuit going through. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, well,
Okay,
forget everything I just said.
yes. So, no, I mean for it. Okay, so I'm going to, we're going to approve the minutes for August 16th, 2023. And once again, thank you, MJ, for fantastic minutes.
Oh,
Um,
don't we want to vote?
Why, we're going to.
Oh, I'm
Would
sorry. I
would
thought you
someone
said
like
we
to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to. approve.
Second? Okay, Wanda seconded. Okay, so a vote to approve the minutes from August 16th. Okay, unanimous. Okay. All right, so we're going to go to old business, and we have Fire Marshal Bullard and our future fireman. Hi, we are just starting. Excellent. And we had just had Fire Marshal Don Bullard join us, and also future Fire Marshal Kim Giuliaschi, who will be our fire marshal in January. Excellent. So just a moment, I'd like to talk about the agenda packet. It's a huge agenda packet. Just to summarize what's in it, the first, I think, 40 pages was all about 13/2023. And then we list out each of the ordinances we're discussing tonight, 2301, 2302, 2303, 2304, and those ordinances are edited to include all the comments we have received so far in our feedback cycle, not only with this committee's comments, but also with resident comments. There are about 3 emails that I have that didn't make it into the packet because I didn't get them in time, but they will be included. And then today we will be closing out our comment period at the end of the meeting so that we'll be reviewing those packets. But what I would like to do is I'd like to rearrange, I'd like to go to 4B before we do 4A, since Fire Marshal Bullitt is here. So we're going to go straight to discussing and reviewing comments on the draft ordinances 2301 through 2304. And I have a little presentation and like I have a slide for each draft ordinance. I'd like to go through a slide for one of the ordinances. Let's discuss it. We'll ask Don and Kim questions. And then when that presentation's all done, we can look at our comment packet, but I want to maximize Don and Kim's time, and having them here to ask questions is the most important thing. So any questions on that? And I think that's what we discussed. Okay. So, is there any public comment about the process I just outlined? Yes, go ahead. This is only, we're only taking discussion on what I just said about, I'm going to 4B rather than 4A. Okay? Yes, Don. I think will be on the agenda.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. There it goes. Okay. Okay, so, and I'm going to do this a little out of order. So 2301 is basically a citation, administrative citation ordinance. It had its first reading on August 29th at the Fire District Board meeting. All it does, is my understanding, is it simply expands the administrative fines from, so in November of last year, the citation ordinance 2201 was passed. All this ordinance does is change the administrative fine so that it's up to $1,000 per violation when the violation qualifies as a misdemeanor. And this would make it consistent with 13-2023, the fire code that was just passed. So that's all this does. The vote by the board is going to be held next week. It was a 30-day comment period. So, Don, do you have anything to add to that description? And can we hear you?
Yeah.
Can you go to the mic?
You
Yes,
should probably grab one of
Yeah,
that.
you can just hold it and keep it with you. Or you're welcome to sit at the table and use that mic or
That mic.
whatever you want to do.
Okay, on administrative, 2201. Well, it was 2201 because we adopted it in 22. And then we made the revision, and the two revisions were to keep the administrative fine consistent with the fire code of $1,000 for a misdemeanor. And then the second item that we changed on it was we made it exempt from CEQA. That was two items that we changed on. Just to,
And you could
just to clarify.
If you'd like, you just sit there.
Sure.
So does anyone have any discussion on 2301?
Oh, Don, what does it mean when you say making something exempt from CEQA?
For this ordinance, there isn't any mitigations that would be necessary. We're not, it doesn't require CEQA for the ordinance. And we were just putting that information in there. There isn't anything that we're doing that would infect the environment. Yeah.
What was that last sentence?
That would affect the environment.
Oh, okay.
So any other questions? Okay, and I just want to note that we received no comments on 2301 and I don't think I have any comments. So just for when we kind of summarize this at the end. Okay, so I'm going to move on to 2304. It's what I have been calling the fuel break ordinance. This, yeah. Oh, you're right. You're absolutely right, Craig. Does anyone in the audience have a question about 2301? I thought I asked that. Okay. So 2304, what I'm calling the fuel break ordinance. This is the information below this is what we've been discussing for the last few months, and this ordinance has been postponed indefinitely. We don't know what the status is. I will say we had an enormous amount of comments about 2304 and concerns, both from this committee and residents. And we will be at the end of the meeting approving the document that I attached to the agenda packet, and we will be sending those comments to Fire Marshal Bullard so that the fire district understands what those concerns are. So does anyone on this committee have anything to comment on 2304? Is anyone in the audience? Yes, go ahead.
Which is, so this is Nona, I'm liaison from conservation. And we did go through that draft ordinance, our subcommittee. And because the draft ordinance has been shelved, we thought it wasn't really productive to submit our comments to this committee. But they sort of resonate with some of the community.
You know, that's just how our technology works. Yeah. It's,
So I just wanted to say why the Conservation Committee hasn't weighed in on this, even though we might otherwise have. It just didn't seem productive to provide feedback on something that had already been shelved.
okay, so we're going to get to this in a few more slides, but I do think it is relevant to know what those comments are, because we've been guaranteed for future ordinances 30 days comment period. And when you only have 30 days to comment, you have to have all your information. So we're going to get to this in a few more slides, but yeah, I am too. So we're going to talk about that. I'd like to bring that up. I would like to have your committee's comments about 2304 in the public records so that we know what your concerns were too. But maybe I have to, maybe you can't do that. I don't know. Maybe I can't ask that.
We received all of the Conservation Committee's comments on 2303 and 2304, both. Yeah.
Yeah.
2303, we in fact incorporated some of them into the second draft and they were put into it. But now, you know, with us moving from the second draft of 2303 into the state's model D-Space program, we can let the Conservation Committee look over the model D-Space program from the state and see, but I would say it's less stringent than the original one that we had.
So, we'll talk about that in about 2 minutes. Okay, so does anyone else on the committee have any comments on 2304? Does anyone in the audience have any comments on 20? Oh, Peter, I'm so sorry, Peter, has your hand been up, please?
Very, very simply, if you can hear me.
Can you speak up, Peter?
I heard you mention that several comments were received that didn't make it into a packet, and I wondered if mine was one of them, and you might want to name the people who did comment. I sent a comment in 9 days ago and just hoped it would be part of the record. That's the extent of my comment.
He was just inquiring whether his email made it into the packet.
Right, I know. So Peter, all the emails that I received, with the exception of about 3, are list which I got too late, are actually at the end of our agenda packet. So I not only put resident comment anonymously in the edited ordinance, but I also attach the original emails at the end of this agenda packet. And when I send it to Fire Marshal Bullard, probably Thursday or Friday, it will have also all the original emails. And I'm going to make a note, and I'm going to check to see if I have an email from you and go ahead and send, if you don't hear from me tomorrow, go ahead and send an email to the Wildfire Preparedness Committee and send the comments. If you want to resend them tonight to make sure. I seem to remember your name.
Okay, I would presumably be one of the three that aren't in the packet because I did look at the packet and my message sent on September 12 is not included in the packet unless I missed
September
something.
12th.
Hey, enough said. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Let me check when let me see if I can check later after my slide presentation is done. Is that a week away? September 12th? MJ? How many days ago is September 12th?
8 days. Today's the 20th.
Then it would have, Peter, your email should have made it into the packet, so I must not have gotten your email. Okay, any other comments about 2304? Yeah, you're gonna have to come to the mic.
Thanks. I'm John Els, 5600 Alpine. We're up in the Western Hills near the Fogarty winery. Obviously, there's a lot of concern about the proposed ordinance. I'm not going to belabor that. I just have a couple of questions. What does postponed indefinitely mean?
Probably look at fuel breaks we will probably look at a fuel break ordinance in sometime in maybe 2024.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
2024.
Okay. I just have to say for the record, we're all hugely in favor of fuel breaks. The more, the better. It's just a question of how it gets done and who pays for it. Yeah, yeah. So further public comment, written comment by midnight tonight. Is that what you said? Or is it over?
Yes, we're gonna end the public comment because there's not, because they're gonna vote on the,
Not on the fuel breaks.
no, but they're gonna vote on 2202 and 2201 next week. And
Okay.
2303 is gonna be rewritten, so there's,
Okay, and 2304 is
Is
the fuel breaks.
postponed.
Okay, correct. Cool. Did you have more comments on the fuel breaks that you wanted to?
well, I mean, it's no secret that many of us who have lived in Portola Valley a long, long time, the cost of the way the breaks are described is extraordinary. I mean, we couldn't do it. Our land, Don, you've gone around our land and around Fogarty's, and some of it we question whether it's even possible because it's so precipitous. And it hasn't been cleared by a natural fire in 100 years, probably something like
100
that.
plus, yeah.
So we know it's a problem, and we all spend an enormous amount of time and money clearing defensible space around the resources, the assets on our property. We have, we're out hundreds of feet, acres and acres of defensible space. And if the breaks as they're described, the 50-foot and 100-foot, I don't think we have any problem with that. The problem is just who's going to pay for it. And we own 19 acres, and going around the perimeter of that piece of land, it's far beyond our means. There's some folks in town who, it's not a problem. But certainly for my wife and I, she's lived here all her life, frankly, 5 generations. It's tough. And I don't know what we would do if it actually went into regulation or into law. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for coming. And I will say, unless Dawn knows something I don't know, I'm very pessimistic about the possibility of some kind of grants for private property grants are very, very difficult to get, especially for a community like ours. And having worked for the last 2 years on the idea of some kind of fire mitigation program, the Portola Valley sponsors, I just don't see it anymore in the budget, given our recent expenditures. So I'm not overly optimistic that there's going to be a lot of help.
Yeah, nor are we. I just have one further question, which has come up among the neighbors. Would this apply to the open space parcels?
You mean like mid 10?
Yeah, yeah.
So what they have is they have their own fire management program.
Okay.
And so what I would request from them is if they have their own fire management program, they just need to clear it with me and tell me that that's what they're going to.
Oh, really? Okay. So
implement.
they would be in some sense exempt from,
No, they're not exempt. They would still need to follow their program.
their
So-
program.
Yeah, but they would have to have a written request with the fire marshal to use their program on the lands.
Okay.
That way, there's a mechanism there for me to be able to enforce that.
Gotcha.
So that they can't say, well, I'm sorry, but we just didn't get to it this year. Right? And
Yeah.
They still need to do their fuel management.
Okay, even if their
as it's outlined.
plan is in conflict with, if this were adopted as written, even if their plan is in conflict with the new regulation.
I don't see where it would be in conflict with the fire management plan. As long as they had a plan in place and they were going to reduce the amount of fuel that they have on their lands, especially where it would be potentially coming in contact with a residential neighbor.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
On that point, do you think that there is a possibility, at some point, there was some verbiage about modification, right? Like, so coming to you with a modification, let's say this resident comes up with what he can do. Could we work that into the ordinance so that on a case-by-case basis? I mean, that was my biggest objection or concern about this, was that it really wasn't a one-size-fit-all, right? So some properties are very unique and residents have different resources. Is there a channel or is there a process? I'd love to see that in this new ordinance for proposing a modification.
So we will keep the modification proposal in there. And additionally, what we also had written into 2303 that we will keep in the model D-Space program from the state was that the Woodside Fire Protection District understands that this ordinance will require much time, energy, and resources, especially on large properties, and that owners will not be cited for non-compliance with the ordinance if they can show evidence of substantial progress toward compliance within the past year as determined by the fire code official. Yeah.
So you're saying that if next year we get a fuel break ordinance, that same kind of verbiage is going to be in there.
That I intend to keep that in. That verbiage is going to stay in. Stay in the
Um,
ordinance.
And in our edits, one of the things that the committee recommended is some kind of process that's maybe it's online that somebody can send in a 5-year plan and they have receipt, bids from a contractor and they say, this is our plan. We commit to do this every year. We're going to send you the status every year, but that this is our budget and we can spend 10 or 20,000. And the reason I say this is I must have talked to 10 residents that have reached out to me because they are currently struggling with dying trees or one of the flammable 5, and they just have so much to do that it's overwhelming. And a lot of people just never really thought about it till recently. So I agree with your goal. I really do. I think it's so important to get this done. I'm just worried about passing an ordinance and then giving people a year to do it.
In the past, we've always tried to work with homeowners on phased plans, especially the big properties like John has. These big properties, we understand that that's a lot of work. It's a lot of money. It's financially, it's tough to do. So if we can come up with a 2 or a 3-year plan and we can phase it out and we can talk about what the priority is for year 1, priorities for year 2, and priorities for year 3, that's what I've always done in the past. And we will continue to keep doing that with homeowners. And those are those are the big property owners, they're the ones that really have the trouble with it. The smaller residential properties, those really, there's not a lot of money involved in trying to keep up with your defensible space.
And I just want to also voice out to the committee because obviously Dawn's going to be leaving, but in the years of my service to the communities that I've worked for, I have always been an advocate to support residents and people because the process, I know it's not simple. Anything, whether it's fire code related, whether it's vegetation, I mean, it really doesn't matter what spectrum you're on, but it's about supporting residents and giving them the tools and the help and the time they need to get to what the goal is. I mean, the changes that have happened here historically, as I've been reviewing and getting to know this district, is it didn't just get like this. It took years to get there. So again, it's going to take years to get it to a place where it should be again, where it should be managed. It's not going to be there is no number really, because you can't say in 2 years, we expect this to be cleared. That's just not realistic. It's going to be an ongoing process, but as long as we're actively working towards those goals, that's all the fire district's going to be looking at. And I will tell you, with all the different mitigation meetings through the state that I've sat on, I've seen other jurisdictions that have different grants that have been available. And yes, they are very difficult, but they're out there. And I am actively working at looking at how we can bring some of these grants here to help support residents with home hardening, defensible space, all those things. So just know that definitely as I carry on forward, it's going to be a process that I'll be looking for the next, I'm not retiring for another 15 to 17 years. So I hope by that time, maybe we'll have good progress at that point. So that is the end goal for me. So I just wanted to let you all know, as I'm getting to know all of you, that is also my intention, is to keep that continuous going. So I know that there is verbiage and information in these ordinances that is hard to swallow and understand because of the change. And sometimes it seems it's so drastic, and it is. And I understand the measures of why they're being put there in the legal way. But realistically, just know that we always have the intention of supporting our residents and helping them get through this process. And just because we're on it right now, I just wanted to also put out there, when that Model D space vegetation that we write up, when that ordinance is ready to be put out, I know the request of time for public comment was out there. Fire district has no problem with allowing that extra time rather than a 30-day period, giving a 60-day period to do that review. We don't have a problem with that. We're not in a rush to adopt it because we're not even looking to put it into play till next year anyway. But in addition to that, even though we've already ratified the fire code, we will be hosting some workshops for the residents that they can come to, that we can educate everybody exactly what all these ordinances mean. We can talk about them. We can have a Q&A session. So we will be looking at, especially when the vegetation one comes off, is you're going to have that 60-day, but during that time, we were going to want to kick it off with offering some workshops and giving you, that way you have time while you're doing your review, you've already had your questions with us. So now you can actually take it all in. We've had our Q&A session, and then you can write your comments appropriately in those 60 days. So I just want to let you all know that that's something that we're also going to be doing.
That's amazing news. So I'm going to even take this further, because now I got the 60-day comment a window. So I would like to see us start preparing residents even earlier. There's a lot of conservation concerns with a fuel break. And if for Patola Valley in particular, it's going to require educating residents so that they don't freak and just dig up everything, and then we get a whole bunch of invasive plants. So it would be wonderful if in the next 6 months we could start a conversation about what, and when we get there, we're going to talk about perimeters, and we're going to talk about fuel breaks, and then it would be great if conservation could start weighing in, and we could think about how we're going to educate residents and I know this committee is going to pivot now to communication, which is what we've been wanting to do for many months. At least that's what I believe. And so it would be great for, we've got some money in our budget for publications and maybe an event, and it would be great to understand what your destination is so we can talk with some authority to residents and say, this is what you need to be thinking about. So we would like to help you. And the best way we can help you is to not wait for 60 days out. Because we agree with your destination. I guarantee you, we agree with where you're going. Our concern is how to get there and also how to do it honoring our conservation heritage.
Sure.
And I don't think those conflict at all. Do they, know? Great.
We've also put provisions in there for environmental concerns. And the way that reads is compliance with the fuel mitigation requirements of this ordinance shall not result in the taking of endangered, rare, or threatened plant or animal species, significant erosion or sedimentation of surface waters. Exceptions will be made for very specific sensitive habitat locations, marshlands, creek banks, a minimum of 50 feet from any riparian corridor, and single specimen trees as determined by the fire code official. When these or other conditions make it impractical to comply with the fuel mitigation requirements, the person who owns, leases, has easement obligation, interest in, or controls of the parcel or parcels shall request that the fire code official grant a modification of these requirements.
My biggest concern is that there's not a lot of good contractors out there. And I know when I moved to the ranch, I had a whole area that had never been touched. And the contractors I brought in, they just said, well, we'll pull everything. And I knew that was wrong. It took a long time to find a contractor that understood what was a good native plant, what could be removed. But there was actually some habitat for wood rats or something. And they had to protect that. And if I had just hired the cheapest contractor, they would have just
Yeah.
come in and mowed everything down.
I can, and it's great between both committees. I know that there are specific contractors who do this specific work that are trained. They have it. It might be a good idea between the committees to, hey, let's put a list together of verified contractors that can do this work that we know from either from other, reviews from other people in other jurisdictions or other, committees that these are, it's kind of like with the same thing we do with known contractors that do fire protection equipment. We know who's good and who's not. So it's coming up with that list of saying, hey, let's come up with this. And that way you can push it out to the residents and give them a list and say, hey, these are people we've verified. They do good work. We trust what they do. They're certified, they're trained. And now you can, get your quotes or estimates or whatever from these groups of people. That can be an idea, that the committees can look at.
I can work with the town. There's a few thorny issues when you make a list and you don't want the town to be advocating for a particular contractor.
Right,
but-
they can't, yeah. But you
Okay.
as residents, can do that on your own.
Can the fire district do that? Because we know as a town that we keep being told.
It's the
we
same
can't.
thing for the
Same for
district. We
us,
can't.
yeah.
What we could do is invite contractors to come to some of these educational, seminars. So if you want to be seen in Portola Valley as being educated, right? So an outreach to contractors
Mhm.
to get them in.
And they're happy to do that. I've spoken
they
to a
want-
few. They want to.
They want to, that's right.
Because they actually care about the environment and just as much. And that's why they don't want non-qualified people to do this work. So they're trying to get out there too.
I think we can do better. I had talked to Cara before she left, and I do think that we can create. I'll work on that. That's okay. So is there anyone that has another comment to make? Christy?
Gosh, the last meeting got me going on more research on this area. So I called Hillsborough. No, I looked up Hillsborough's fire-wise, and maybe you can answer some of these questions now. They do a 2-year plan and they divide their city into north and south, and they are Firewise community, which I don't know if that requires a 2-year plan. but-
Christy, I'm so sorry. We're only taking comments on 2304 right now.
So it's it's,
On a fuel break?
yeah, this has to do with fuel break. They hit half of their town in one year, south, and then they'll hit half of their town north in another year. So I'm just bringing that up as an idea. And then Truckee does a 5-year plan where they get it into 5 chunks. So they know every 5 years they've done the best job they could do. So I'm just curious what our plan is and what we want to do, because it sounds like we could do a 2-year plan or a 5-year plan. And how are we going to break up our city and really do the best we can do in each little section?
I'm confused. Are you talking about inspections or are you talking
Fuel
about?
breaks.
But
Yeah,
So-
I'm starting to look at other cities. Are we on track? Are we not on track?
John, isn't it?
I
kind
think
of-
I can answer that. So in the Woodside Fire Protection District, we have a total of about 6,000 parcels. And we have 2 full-time inspectors, 3 if you count the deputy fire marshal, and then of the fire marshal. So what we do is we bring on extra help during fire season, which we call fire season. I know, they've kind of done away with fire season and it's year round now in California. But our typical fire season starts in May and goes through the end of October. And so during that time, we bring on extra help. And so, like I said, we have 6,000 parcels that we need to cover. So what we try to do is we try to do a 3-year rotation, and we try to hit about 2,000 parcels a year with the inspectors and the resources that we have. And during those inspections, we look at defensible space, 100 feet around the house. Okay, the 3 zones, the home ignition zone, zone 0, zone 1, and zone 2. And at the end of zone 2 would be your perimeter property line. And we look at that all in an inspection. So we look at the perimeter property line as well. So I would say, Christy, in a 3-year period, we try to cover the entire district. Okay.
Is there any other questions from the audience on 2304? So now we're going to 2303. Oh, Peter, I'm so sorry. Go ahead, Peter. I didn't see your hand.
Okay, hey, it's wonderful to have the outgoing and incoming fire marshal here and to comment just a little bit on the fuel break. Don has always been wonderfully flexible and thoughtful in my wife and my interactions with him. The problem with ordinances that are written on paper, they tend to at least appear very inflexible. And I would just make a pitch for, in a future fuel break ordinance, especially for larger parcels, there be consideration for something other than just perimeter fuel breaks. Some parcels, as mentioned earlier, have riparian habitat or very steep slopes. And for instance, in particular, in our case, it's very easy to create, we have about 5.5 acres, very easy to create a very broad fuel break within the parcel and very difficult around the perimeters just because of the nature of the land. So to ask for a relatively large fuel break, 2 or even 300 feet within some of the larger parcels, interior within the parcel, and where they are strategically located with respect to prevailing winds or something like that would seem to me to be a desirable alternative option. And I realize because this is being rewritten, we have time to deal with it. But with the 2 marshals here now, I just wanted to throw out that idea. Thank you for the opportunity to mention it.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay, so with that, we're going to move on to 2303. And I just want to say how I'm so glad that Kim and Don are here answering our questions. And I hope that it's a monthly occurrence. And if there's anything we can do by setting a different time during the meeting that's better for you, we will do that. Okay, so 2303 is being rewritten, and the bullet points that you see was what 2303 included. So it is being rewritten, and based on an email to me from Fire Marshal Bullard and also notes from a meeting he had with Councilman Taylor, 2303 is being replaced with the state's model D space. And I'm going to go through what D space is in a second. Plus, and I'm going to come back to this slide in a second. So we're going to review this again. Plus the following additions. So it's going to be elements of the Model D space, and there's going to be a perimeter property line clearance of 50 feet. Vacant lots will need to be cleared in their entirety of hazardous fuels. There'll be a reinspection fee for any inspection after the third inspection for the same violation within a year. No planting of flammable 5 within zone 0. As Don had mentioned earlier, a provision for residents to stage fire mitigation over time, just showing they've made progress, and a guarantee of 30-day comment period, which Kim has said is going to be at least 60, which is fantastic. So D space, and this slide comes from a document, a draft of the D space model that John Morgan sent MJ, who's on Zone 0 working group, on August 24th. So it's you will not find anything about D space on the web. It's too new. And it is not a standard or guideline. It's more of a template. So it includes a whole bunch of things. I'm sure MJ would send it to you. It's 42 pages. I'm not sure if we could put it in next month's agenda. Actually, John Morgan has offered to actually come and talk to us about it if you want. But it includes a template for good inspection cycles, citation process, abatement process, appeals, how you make the collection of that abatement fee. It also includes a suggestion of that prior to close of escrow, the seller of the property must be in compliance with fire ordinances. And there's also some guidance on that vegetation needs to be trimmed at least 13.5 feet of vertical clearance. And so basically, they can't interfere with emergency vehicle access. So it's a very large document, and it includes a lot of items. It also talks about fuel ladders and plant spacing requirements. It's very much what we've talked about in the past. It's nothing that different. It also has descriptions of zone 0, 1, and 2. For zone 0, it's pretty moderate. You remove combustible materials adjacent. We're talking 0 to 5 feet away from the homes. Remove combustible materials near ducts and porches. That it's that same no combustible bark or mulch that was in 2303. They say use hardscape and flagstone and non-combustible materials. Trim up your branches minimum of 10 feet above your roof and your ducts and the structure. No dead or dying grass, plants, and shrubs within zone 0, and relocate firewood piles. So in addition, both Kim and Don have offered to create a document for vegetation to provide residents. So what vegetation is suggested, what's considered combustible, what is less combustible. And this is going to give us a lot of clarity, and I think that's a great idea. Kim also offered to hold several town halls for upcoming ordinances and answer questions, and I hope that includes draft ordinances, which I think would be incredible, and we'd love to help you with that. So this is where we're at with the rewrites. So what questions do we have for Dawn?
If I can just add to what
Yes,
you
please.
said, just one thing, and I wasn't sure, so I may have misunderstood, but the defensible space ordinance that we're looking to write, the model that we're using, Model D, as put by the state, it is available online. I can send you the link if you want to disseminate it to your group so that they can kind of get familiar with what it says. So I'm happy to send that link to you. Just that little added.
Additionally, all of those items that you discussed earlier that are in that ordinance, when you talk about the,
What it is.
what it is, and then, how to conduct an inspection for it. It's an entire program for maybe an agency, a fire agency that has never had it before. We've had this for many years, and we have all of the abatement, we have the ordinances for the abatement. We've already put them into play. So a lot of this is already done for Woodside Fire. What we're really adopting here is we're adopting Appendix D, which is conducting defensible space inspections for the home ignition zones, Zone 0, Zone 1, and Zone 2. So that's a very small section of this. Everything else, we already have that in play for Woodside Fire, and we have our own way of doing our abatement, and we have our own appeals process, and they talk about all that in the ordinance, but we already have that in place. So really what you're really looking at is Appendix D, which goes over the requirements for defensible space.
And I'll send you that link so that you can get familiar
Yeah.
with that long document.
So I have two questions. So what is the difference between the perimeter property line clearance of 50 feet and a fuel break for 50 feet?
It's the same. It's a fuel break. What you're creating is a fuel break. And we've had, so there's, in addition to this is what we intend to do with our vegetation ordinance, is go with what the state's Model D space program is. And then we were going to add into that 3 sections that we've already had adopted for the last 10 years, 10 plus years. We've already had a perimeter property line clearance. It used to be 30 feet. And 6 years ago, we raised it to 50 feet because it was working out very well for the district. And then what that perimeter property line clearance is, a perimeter property line clearance, persons owning, controlling, or leasing structures and or property are required to remove a minimum of 50 feet from the perimeter of the property line and 100 feet from any neighboring structure, specifically flashy fuels consisting of dead weeds, dry annual grasses, as well as dead vegetative material and litter that is capable of being easily ignited and endangering property as determined by the fire marshal. So you're not creating what some people might think is a fire break, where you're just, you're taking a dozer blade and scraping it down to bare mineral dirt. That's not what we're asking you to do. What we're asking you to do is removing the dead, the dry grasses, the weeds. If you have any dead trees or dead wood on the ground, that's what we're asking you to remove, because what that does is it now creates a 100-foot fire break between properties
Oh, yeah. Okay,
to
so
protect your neighbor's property as well as your own.
And within that guideline, Jennifer, that we'll be writing for, we can clearly define the difference between, so a fuel break and a fire break, so that they don't get confused. Fire breaks is different, is what, operations during a fire of what the hand crews do. But the fuel break, and I just wanted to just give you language that what it is it gives you different approaches that we can offer, but mainly it's just to create strategic locations such as along ridge lines or around communities. And the concept is to provide a defensible location for use by firefighting crews or to reduce the fire intensity in wildland urban interface. That's basically what it is. And it is removing those dead fuels and things that would increase the hazard should we come to protect a property. And it's basically creating a space for firefighters to stand and fight.
So if we had, so what is the difference between the 2304 fuel break ordinance and this kind of perimeter property line clearance?
There isn't really much of a difference. In 2304, we increased that 50-foot perimeter property line to 100 feet for some of the larger properties. Okay. And then we also, if somebody had, let's say they owned 5 properties and they were all together, we weren't going to ask them to do a perimeter around each property, but if they did one big one around every parcel that they owned, then we were going to accept that. So it would, there's just different nuances, but the 50-foot perimeter property line clearance is the same.
So we're gonna have maybe 6 months before you rewrite this?
There's going to be time. It might be even, you mean for the fuel break ordinance, if
For-
we
for-
were to do that?
Well,
Or are you
I'm-
talking about the vegetation ordinance, this one?
Well, this one, because, so I'm confused.
No.
So if we're rewriting 2303 to include a perimeter property line clearance, which is the same as the 2304 fuel break, we're saying that when this rewrite comes out, we're essentially going to have,
Yes, I intend to put this, we've had this perimeter property line clearance. We've had it for the last 10 years. It's already been in our fire code. The reason why I'm putting it into the vegetation management ordinance is because we took it out of the fire code because we wanted to keep vegetation management separate from the building standards code, okay? The fire code is a building standards code. We wanted to keep the vegetation management separate, except for what's already in the state of California's fire code. So we took this out of the fire code, which is where it lived for the last 10 years. And I want to just take it out of the fire code and put it into our vegetation management ordinance, which is where I think it belongs.
so we need to really think about how we're going to start getting residents to think about this.
Well, the residents already know about it. We've had it for 10 years.
They've been doing it.
They've been doing it. This is an ordinance. The reason why I want to keep it is because it's been working out well for the district. There's 2 others that we're going to keep too that we've had for the last 10 years. The second one is a weed abatement. And it says, due to heavy growth of fuels, unmaintained lots are a hazard to the surrounding properties in the community. So the Woodside Fire Protection District shall carry out weed abatement program activities throughout the territory of the Woodside Fire Protection District. Vacant parcels without any structures, that's vacant parcels that have no structures on them, shall be mowed of flashy fuels consisting of dead weeds and dry annual grasses in their entirety, with the exception of conservation areas, sensitive habitat, marshland, creek banks, and a minimum of 50 feet from any riparian corridor prior to July 1st of each year. That one we want to keep. And then the third one that we want to keep is called a reinspection of violation. We had this in the past, and reinspections of the same violation shall incur an hourly fee of whatever our hourly fee is right now for every hour of reinspection after the 3rd inspection of the same violation at the same location within a 1-year period.
So those 3 that are keeping are the things that Dawn pulled out of the fire code that has been in there for the last 10 years, as he was saying.
I'm currently reading this out of our last fire code. This
That's
was ordinance
currently-
number 12 right here. And we had that in ordinance number 12 for the last 3 years. And prior to that, it was in ordinance 11 and then ordinance 10 prior to that.
So it just is moving into a new document.
So we're just moving it into a new document.
Okay.
And then the other thing that we wanted to add is the Wildfire Preparedness Committee came up with the flammable 5. And we just do not want to have those in zone 0 in the home ignition zone.
So that's a very different way of thinking about this. This is really good information. So what we're saying is if you had just kept 2304 and you had passed it, there was nothing in 2304 that wasn't already in the fire code. It was not new.
The 100 feet would
No,
have
the
been
100
new.
feet,
100
yeah, I was for large landowners, I was gonna increase it to 100 feet. Just because the size of the fire could be much greater on a larger piece of land, and you would need to slow that fire down before it moved across.
Does anyone on the committee have anything? The
Oh.
committee, Nona?
So I have a question about Appendix D. I actually had the link, so our subcommittee from conservation started looking at the model these days. And the question is, should we start looking at Appendix D now, or should we wait until we get more guidance in terms of how it might be modified?
I don't think there's any harm looking at it now because the language that's in there is going to be taken in anyway. It's going to pretty much be the exact language with the additions of what Dawn was just speaking of are the only added things, and also expanding on the definition on what is hazardous vegetation. So which is already in Appendix A of that Model D program. So it has a great definition, which I think would help explain a lot more. So that would be, so I don't see any harm already reviewing it and starting to prepare that way, gives you time. Plus it might give you time to formulate those questions. So when we do have that workshop, you come prepared and say, okay, we went over it. These are the questions we kind of had. So.
And is the best feedback questions, or is it better to say, how about if you include, or how about if you change this? to-"
Either way, I mean, comments and questions. Yeah.
Because you're
Yeah.
gonna have some that are gonna be questions, and they're gonna be some things that you might want to incorporate. So just put it in
Yeah.
that context.
We've had an ongoing question about mulch because it retains soil moisture, but like everything else in life, it's flammable. So there are things like that that we'd really like to get a better handle on.
I think I have
everyone.
some answers for some of those questions too. So, yeah.
It'd be great to get like a question and answer document just going. And we can just send questions and then.
You could do like a Google Docs. So it's just a, document that can be shared and updated and what have you.
Um,
Well, wood mulch, any kind of wood mulch, redwood mulch, pine mulch, whatever, eucalyptus mulch, and then probably the worst of it all would be the gorilla hair, real fine. So number one, it's combustible. So the embers from any kind of an ignition, from any kind of a wildfire, putting out embers, if you want to put mulch close to the house within the 0 to 5 foot zone 0, there's potential there for that mulch to carry a flame to the house. And whether that house has combustible siding or non-combustible siding, what we want to do is we want to keep that radiant heat, that flame contact off of the structure itself. And so the requirement in zone 0 is to have no mulch whatsoever, any combustible mulch, whether it's wood, gorilla hair, and keep that outside of that 5 foot zone so that it cannot make contact with the home itself. Radiant heat would probably not be a good example because you're probably not going to get that much radiant heat off of mulch, but it can definitely carry a 1 foot flame length right up to the house where it's going to be really dangerous. But the other thought on that, because your comment about the mulch being good to retain moisture, if you just did it around the base of a tree and it was only a 3 or 5 foot diameter and then it didn't carry any further than that, or it didn't have the ability to carry from that section to another, that might be okay. I would allow that because it makes sense to me that you're doing it for a purpose, but it can't carry that flame length to the structure itself.
Any other questions? Yes, go ahead, John.
This is great. I really appreciate this public forum. I want to follow up on Jennifer's question. Maybe my poor brain can't handle it, but I don't understand the difference between the 50-foot perimeter that's noted here and the 50-foot perimeter in the proposed ordinance 2304 that's been put on hold. What am I missing? So if
So the 2304 was a much bigger fuel break. It was an ordinance just on fuel breaks, right?
right, yeah.
And I added a number of, there was the larger properties had to go out to 100 feet.
Really? So if this has been on the books for a long time, are we already all in violation of the fire code? If we don't have at least a 50-foot perimeter around our property, a fuel break?
Technically, I guess you could say you're
Okay.
like I said, I try to work with property
Sure,
owners.
sure, yeah.
If
Yeah.
you have an area that's inaccessible,
Yeah.
that you can't get to, and it doesn't make sense to put it there, then I don't ask you to do that.
Yeah.
And I understand that.
Okay.
But we have to have a mechanism in place for everybody. We can't, you know what I'm saying? There has to be a mechanism there, and that legal language has to be written a certain way for a purpose.
Yep.
And so, you know, we try to do the best we can. We have to have that language, but I also understand practicality of a homeowner like yourself that has 19 acres that you have to deal with, and some of that 19 acres is just inaccessible, and I agree to work with you on that.
I mean, we expect to live in our house until they carry us out in a box. But there are, you know, I know that to sell a house around here, I think you have to show that it's in compliance with all the fire codes and regulations. And that, it's not a problem for us, but I suspect that may come up from other property owners. Anyhow,
I think
To be continued.
technically right now, it's only if you're in what? A high or very high fire zone?
Yes.
But,
yeah.
but if we adopt Model D space, it will be for everyone.
yeah,
is my
okay,
understanding.
right, okay, yeah. To be continued.
Well,
Let's see. Thanks again, guys.
we got to get to the destination. It's the question of how, you know, whether we just have to bring everyone with us. Okay, so if there's, yes, come down.
Yeah, so I just want to clarify, Don, when you say D-space ordinance and vegetation management ordinance, to you, those are the same thing?
Same thing.
Okay.
The D space is just the title that the state put out for that specific defensible space program that they wrote. That's just that title. We're calling it a vegetation ordinance. So, but they are one and the same as far as we are taking that D space language to put it into what our 2303 vegetation ordinance is going to be.
I guess if you want to look at it this way, doing your vegetation management allows for defensible space for your firefighters to defend your home.
Oh, sure. I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure because,
Yeah, they're not two different
you know,
things.
I'm taking notes,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And you guys, and you know,
I know it's hard.
kind of
That's
change
why
the
I s-
words. So I just want to make sure we're all talking
You're
about.
a
this one
homeowner,
ordinance.
you're doing your vegetation management to allow for defensible space for us to come in and have a safe place to
Right, I
defend your
understand that.
home.
Yeah, but it
Yeah.
is the same.
it's the same.
We are intermixing the two terms.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, that's
yeah.
fine. I just want to make sure I had it straight. And then the other question I had was, so you're gonna base when you work on this D-spaced ordinance, you're gonna use the December 2022 D-space model, because Jennifer sent me a copy and I realized it was based on the 2021 version instead of the 2022 version.
I only have
I'm
one
not sure I
version.
understand that.
Yeah, I only have one version.
Yeah, well, see, that's what Jennifer was referring to. There's the December 2022 D-space model, which is not on the internet, but I got a copy directly from John Morgan, who's the author of that model ordinance.
I'm going to send the link, which is what we were going, and I'm
Yeah.
looking at which one you're talking. So I see December 2021 provides, is that the one you're talking about? Or you're talking about there's another version?
If you
I'll have to
at
look
the
into it.
very last line, almost the last line of the document, it gives the date. And so the one I was looking at was for December of 2022.
I'm looking
And-
at 2021.
Yeah, so you guys might want to get the latest. The main difference is that December 2022 has a really tight definition of zone 0, which also includes things like you can't have trellises, wooden trellises on your house that are growing vegetation. You know, you can't have ivy climbing up the walls, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So, and those are the areas that I am the most worried about educating residents. is
Thanks for
because-
letting us know that. We'll
Yeah.
make sure we'll look at that.
Yeah, because, you know, just walking around my neighborhood, I know that there are so many people that will throw rocks at me if I tell them.
Who's,
Get
who's,
rid of it.
if you don't mind me asking, John Morgan, you mentioned his name. Who
Yeah.
is he with CAL FIRE?
Yeah, he's in charge of the D space.
John Morgan? Okay.
Yeah, John Morgan. I can,
I'll have to get his contact
I put it-
information.
Well, he sent me a version, but you should get his, whatever he has is the latest, because I asked him like over a month ago, and I don't know how much it's in flux.
Okay. Don, well, MJ knows him, but he's offered to actually come to the committee and give a presentation on D-Space. If
That's
that would be
great.
helpful,
Yeah.
that's what we should do next
Yeah.
month.
And
Okay.
then he could take all the fire
I don't mind.
for writing it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to move on if there's no other comments. Oh, public comment. On 2303.
I mean, I'm not technically liaison, but I mean, this is sort of seems like the obvious opening. So first of all, I'm really excited that I think we've got a much stronger working relationship with the district. So I think that's great. I had two comments I wanted to make. One was I'm hoping that this committee and the Conservation Committee can work with the district on the guidelines document. Because the way I look at the guidelines document is the ordinances are mostly, you can't do this, you can't do that. It's a whole list of all the things you can't do. Whereas I'm hoping the guidelines are going to be much more, here are all the things you can do. Like, here are the kind of plantings that we recommend here, da, 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 da. So that it will be a more positive, more like, wow, here's something a homeowner can do with their house. So that's the first one. And then the second one, I would say on this perimeter property line, I hear you that the district's saying that that's been in the ordinances already. But I also think we've heard from at least two residents that they're probably out of compliance. And so I think when you go to think about 2303, that you think about some of these ideas that were mentioned here today, potentially having some sort of clearing, but maybe not necessarily at the perimeter. And then also something where there's an ability for the homeowner to basically work through this stuff. And so, we've kind of talked about these things, but because of that, I think that means that 2303, probably on this one item alone, may need more public input, like to give it a little bit longer runway.
Longer than 60 days?
I mean, my recommendation is we start today and start moving on that and because I think the first thing is you guys need to think about, like, how can we write the ordinance in such a way that homeowners can comply without it just being subject to, and I'm going to put this in air quotes, the whims of the fire marshal. Because I think you heard that at the council meeting. I mean, the one hesitation about passing the fire code at the last council meeting was that there was an awful lot of, okay, there are all these things you guys could do as the district, and we're trusting you to be reasonable. And I think you heard particularly from Judith a sense of, we can probably write better ordinances that have some of this flexibility written into the ordinance. So it's not just a verbal agreement, but that we actually write an ordinance that says, here's what we expect, and here's how we, the district, are going to work with homeowners to get them to that place. And I think we can get that language, if we work on it, into the ordinance. So yeah, I mean, 60 days might be enough, but I think the first thing is for you guys to take a crack at some language we could put in the ordinance that would sort of show some of that flexibility. And I think it's possible. I mean, I don't think we're looking for, all possible scenarios, but I think it's generally some of the things that that we've talked about. I think there's an opportunity to get some of that stuff in the ordinance as part of your addition, because you're going to add this stuff to the Model D. So I think when you go to add the perimeter property line clearance, I think that'd be the perfect place to add in some of the stuff we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Just to comment, Craig, on what you said. So those terms that you're saying as approved by the fire code official, or what, that's straight out of the fire code. That is not our language. That is not verbiage that we decided to add. That comes directly out of code. So the code gives that authority to us as AHJs, just so you know that we didn't just say, oh, let's make, it wasn't made up. That's language directly from there. So just so you know, and then the other thing is, as you said, in the guideline, that's exactly the whole goal of the guideline is to help people know, give them guidance on how to accomplish what this ordinance says and how to go about doing it. That's the whole point of that. Also, to make clear, because I think it's a confusion that people have, when you do a 50-foot clearance, that doesn't mean cut down all your trees either. So clearance doesn't mean remove everything down to dirt and nothing exists. So it's important to make that distinction. You know, alive, healthy trees, we can't require you to remove a tree. That's a completely different thing. So I think understanding that, and I know it's confusing to a lot of residents when they think clearing, they're thinking clear. And that's again, something in that policy that it'll describe that so people have that understanding that that's not what that means.
So as far as the guidelines, there's a lot of talent on this committee. We're small, but there's a lot of talent.
But that's great. We need that.
Think about what you might want, think that how we might help you, and then let's chat. And maybe that's something that I know I do a lot of document writing, so
Yeah, it could be helpful for the
help you.
Conservation Committee.
Yeah.
The point of that, though, is that we know these are the things that we don't want there. There's a whole lot of stuff that you can put there,
exactly.
but there's a whole lot of stuff you can put there. And, you know, that list is going to be extensive, but we know we don't want this. And
But I think
that's
that
why we
some-
put it in here, is because it just keeps it short and simple. These are the things that you can't put.
And I think the additions that you would offer, like, you know, obviously you can't include, you know, 1,000 list of things or plants or, so, you know, giving people a link or a resource, hey, you can go to this resource, but, you know, the whole thing is to provide people some kind of guide and a place to go to for additional information or resources. But we're just doing the meat and potatoes on this and then referencing other things that they can utilize to help support them through the process.
There's been some talk about a garden, an example garden. We've talked about all sorts of things. My priority would be to start not so much the specific text. I'm much more interested in where we want to get to and how we do that in such a way that we have suggested contractors and we have a sample garden and we can really give residents a packet where they really understand what they need to do. And then if it's overwhelming financially, they know to reach out to you and to say, hey, we need time. That's more my concern, is that I just want to know where we're going so we can prepare. No.
I was just going to suggest that, you know, conservation has a number of handouts already, and maybe we could do a reciprocal thing where you review what we've done to see if we got it right in terms of guidelines, and then we give you some feedback on your documents.
Sure.
Yeah, actually, as a follow-on to that, you know, at the town council meeting, you guys mentioned that you don't have a list of hazardous vegetation or what vegetation can be planted, but actually the Conservation Committee does. And it would be great if in your guidelines or your ordinances, you pointed to the Portola Valley Conservation Committee, because they have done so much good work.
We work very closely with conservation, so it's not a problem at all.
Yeah. We definitely will, we rely on that. So that's a big help.
Yeah, that's not our expertise. But it's
Yeah.
definitely yours.
And okay, so is there any other questions about the space? Okay, no, nothing from the audience. Okay, so next we go to 2302. I gave it two names because I have been calling it abatement ordinance, and then recently Dawn has been calling it a nuisance ordinance. It was introduced and had the first reading on August 29th. We've known this was coming. This committee has known it was coming for several months. It basically says hazardous vegetation, combustible rubbish, etc., is defined in this ordinance, can be abated to the satisfaction of a fire code official. And the big thing that this ordinance does is, and it's my understanding, I'm sure that Kim and Don will correct me, is that currently if the district abates a property, they've had to send that bill to the county, and the county kind of takes their time and he puts a lien on the house, and the district doesn't get the money back. And what this ordinance will do is it will put in place something that a lot of districts do, which is to have the county, first, of course, the homeowner gets a 30-day notice and here's your bill. And there's a whole process of what happens before abatement that's spelled out very clearly in this ordinance. But if you don't pay the bill in 30 days, the county can tax you for it. So they will send you a bill as a tax. So you must pay it that's a tax bill you got this year. And it's going to allow the fire district to recoup the cost of the abatement and all of the other time and process that went into it. And then this is going to be voted on next week, a 30-day comment period, which is not ideal. But do you have anything to add to that? Okay. So
No, it's
do we want
correct.
to discuss any of this? Okay. So most of you know, I actually gave a presentation on enforcement. Oakland did a wonderful study of Fire Council of Oakland did Fire Safe Council of Oakland did a great study and hired a consultant after the big Oakland fires on enforcement. And the most, I think, effective fire mitigation program you can have is a good enforcement program. And to have a good enforcement program, you have to have citations. You have to have a 3-year inspection cycle, which is exactly what we're doing. You have to have citations. You have to have abatement. And I'm sorry? Oh, and you have to have abatement. You have to have the ability to bring someone into compliance. And actually, after a complete inspection cycle, they found that 90 to 100% of compliance happened after that inspection cycle because people stayed in compliance. And they had great examples of small towns, big towns. And I say this to you because there might be people watching going, I don't like abatement, but it actually does work. So my question is, do we as a committee want to endorse this ordinance? Do we want to, at the board meeting next week? I mean, I would certainly say I wish we had had a 60-day comment period, and I wish residents had more of a time to comment. However, this is really a standard tool that the district should have had for a long time.
You want to just do it as a personal statement?
I could do it as a personal statement. I will do it as a personal statement. I'd rather do it as a committee statement, but if I could torture you all and give you my presentation again on enforcement. I have it on my computer, but no. Okay, do you want it? I will be happy to do a personal statement. Okay.
Well, does anyone want to make a motion?
Oh, I'm sorry, Christy. Go ahead.
When I called Tahoe Donner, I believe they have $1,000 first time, $1,000 second time, $1,000 third time. They don't pay. Then it's taken out of the sale of their property when it changes hands. So eventually they are forced to pay. So that's what I learned about Tahoe Donner, 6,000 residents.
Yeah. So
So, you know,
go ahead, MJ.
I just want to say, you know, I've told this story many times, but I actually used to own a piece of property in the Oakland Hills. It was just this little thing on a very steep slope, and we were just about getting ready to sell it, and the Oakland fire hit. So then I sat there and held on to that property for 30 years. But basically what Oakland did was they undergrounded everything. And then they put that on your property tax bill. And so that was, I forget, like $2,000 or $3,000 a year. And then they also started doing all these inspections, and every, you know, early summer, late spring, they would come around, and if you hadn't mowed your empty lot, they would fine you. And so it would cost us, you know, another 1,000 a year to have somebody out there to get on that steep slope and cut down all that brush. And you had to get it down to, you know, 6 inches or a foot or something. So I do know from personal experience that enforcement works.
And I'll add to that because it's a good story to share, MJ. And that's because so now, just so you know, complete transparency with everything that we are bringing about, there are jurisdictions that are extremely firm, extremely strict. They enforce they don't even, it's not even education to the residents. It's here you go. This is what you need to do. End of story, right? We're introducing these ordinances. We want to work with the residents, but you know, in 6, 7, 8 years where this has already been in existence, it'll come to a point where it's kind of like, okay, and I'm not talking about all residents. I'm talking about the smaller amounts that just don't do anything or don't, you know, everyone works hard to try to maintain their property. Everyone's trying to do their best. But then there's people that just don't do anything, nor do they want to. Maybe they can, maybe they need help. I mean, that's the outreach that I'm looking at doing, especially with people who maybe they're elderly, maybe they don't have family to help them, maybe they don't. So we are looking for programs to help support those people, to bring people to help them with their clearance. So it's not to say that there are not answers for everyone, but at some point, you know, when those enforcement actions happen, that's why this ordinance is being put is down the line as we come across. That's where it's going to start getting to for like what Oakland does, like what Marin does. I mean, there's a lot of jurisdictions do that, but we felt that it was important right now and for a while is to get people used to it, understand what it means, what do they need to do, because again, the goal is not, that's not the goal. That's like the extreme when nobody wants to do anything, because like you said, it does work sometimes. Lighting that fire under someone, it does get them to start moving. And sometimes that's what we need to get people going. But for the most part, as far as since I've been here and the people I have spoken to and worked with, everyone wants to do their part. Everyone's trying to. So I'm not too concerned with it'll be a smaller percentage than it is for the most on doing where that will be required.
These are designed for a small percentage of people in this district that you have to have a mechanism to get them to comply. For the most part, 95% of these residents want to do the right thing, and they do.
Right. And I know from personal experience, you get that letter that says, oh, and by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What?
And yeah, you comply. So
I do think the idea of having that form you can fill out and say, I'd like 3 years. I have the estimates. I attach the estimates from the contractor. I will send, it is my responsibility to send into you every year the receipts that I've done this, this, and this. I really do think that is a mechanism that could be a win-win for everyone, especially with these perimeters. I just think those perimeters, we're going to have a lot of people that are going to struggle financially, and we don't want to abate. It's not good for anybody,
But those perimeters can be part of a phased program too. They can be a 3-year phased program, and each year you show me,
Yes.
you show me the progress that you've made, and that falls right in line with what I've written into the ordinance. So,
right. And now you will have a tool that will get people's attention. Okay, so I don't hear a lot of enthusiasm to have the committee endorse this. So I will make it a personal endorsement. Okay. All right, so that closes that portion. We're going to move on, and we're going to discuss So Dawn, you're taken off? I think we're going to discuss the editing the ordinance packets and closing out the comments, which I don't think, I do encourage you to read those comments, especially for the fuel break, so that you understand what people's concerns are, and let's start addressing them now so that we don't have we have less unhappy people, and we educate, and especially the financial and conservation concerns. I think you'll find some of the comments really insightful. And I will send those to you probably this week, and I'll attach all the original resident emails so you can see what the comments were. And then we're just going to discuss. Yes, go ahead, Dee.
I was letting you finish, but
Go ahead.
I just want to say thank you so much to both of you for being here. And to Craig's point, the tone of this meeting was one of working together and collaboration. And I think it was also shown that there is a lot of education that needs to happen. I mean, I learned things tonight that I didn't know. And I've been working at this for over a year, you know.
That's good.
I think that's our main purpose of this committee is to educate and to help the residents. And so I look forward to collaboration with you, Tim, for sure. And Don, thank you for attending, but really, I just appreciated the tone of tonight. And I also appreciate the edits that you have made.
Great, thank
Yeah,
you. Thank you
gratitude.
very much. No, we're here to work with the committee, and, you know, I think you guys will be a good tool to help us with the public outreach and, you know, educating the residents on, you know, how this process works and what can and can't be done on the property. And we're looking forward to working with it. That's our whole point, is to educate the residents and have them, you know, voluntarily come to compliance rather than having us have to come down on them. That's the last thing we ever want to do. So, yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
Thank you so
I
much.
want to, can I just piggyback on Dee and really thank you guys for coming tonight. You know, I just am really happy how this is working out. You know, Craig Taylor in the town council meeting said, you know, without public comment, you have unanticipated consequences. And I think the fact that you guys are willing to talk to all of us in this kind of a forum, as opposed to like a town council thing where you can't really say very much on the public side.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just so glad you guys came. So thank you.
Yeah, and in moving forward into the future, the 4 o'clock timeframe should be fine. That's typically, you know, once a month, that shouldn't be a problem. So. Okay,
Thank
good.
you.
Have a good night, everyone.
You know what? That's not on the agenda. We're
Pass them outside.
right. Yes, go ahead and grab them outside. Okay, so I want to move to, so we have I am no longer sharing the screen, right? Okay, good. 4A. I'm not going to forget 4A. No, it's going to hope, well, maybe it'll be out by 6. Okay, so we have 4 documents for the 4 ordinances with comments. 2301 had no comments. I have like 3 more resident comments that I received on 2303 and 2304 that I'll attach to the fire district. I'm going to send these documents to Dawn with a memo that says, here's our feedback. I'm sure every one of this committee read those comments in detail. Does anybody have anything to edit or to add?
I just wanted to thank everyone in the public for submitting those. I thought they were terrific. They were all great.
I was so surprised, and I can't tell you how many emails I just got to say, when is your meeting? What's happening? And I also think that the approach of getting the town to approve an email, putting it in the newsletter, and then me sending it to all of my list is really, really effective. So when we get that next ordinance, that's what we're going to do right away. So do we have to have any detailed discussion? So I have so can we vote, that I can send those edited ordinances to Fire Marshal Bullard as presented in the agenda packet? Yes. Okay, so can somebody make that motion? So move. We just say so moved. Well, don't we? Or we don't need to vote, right? Okay. Okay, right. Okay.
Yeah, you're just adding the 3 or so, you know.
Yeah, and I will send a little, I'll thank them for providing us the comment period. Okay, so then we're moving on to 4A. The topic is the 13/2023. So the town council ratified 13/2023.
Craig want to be in on this? You want me to go get him? Didn't he just say?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
But you
yeah.
did ask if we were gonna cover it.
You're so nice. We're gonna be out of here by 6.
You say he's coming in? Did you say anything?
I gave him notice.
You know
Go
what?
ahead.
Well, all right, so let's keep talking.
You know, I'm looking at.
I think it was Lipman. Is that Bev Lipman? Did you want to just?
Hi, and if Peter, you're still listening. Yes, I got your email. And it should have been in the agenda packet. Or it is, I have it and it will be in the agenda packet. But I definitely
Okay,
got it.
thanks. I did not see it in the agenda packet, but I'm glad that
No,
you.
it'll be in the packet I sent Dawn.
Oh. Are you gonna put that back in?
I don't think so. I don't think we want to have that same thing. Okay, so, I
and
really
start.
don't want to wait.
Yeah, go ahead and start.
I just, moving
Gave him
on.
notice.
Yeah, so 13/2023 was ratified. Both MJ and I spoke, and I have to thank the town council because I feel that they were very attentive. They took our concerns very, very seriously. I cannot tell you how heard I felt. And this was a difficult issue, and they ratified the fire code. So do we want to continue any discussion for 13/2023 or just move on to other items?
I would like to say something. I would like to apologize for almost going postal in that meeting. Yeah, they kept asking me, telling me my 3 minutes was up and I just kept going. So I apologize. I did not represent the committee well, but it's worked out great. So I'm happy.
Okay. All right. So is there any other comments from the committee on 13/2023? Is there any comments from attendees on 13/2023? Okay, so we're moving on. All right, Conservation Committee update. And I just want to say, I had talked to your chair 3 months ago about tree tags and how to fast track them. This might have been 6 months ago. And I've been trying to, and Laura Russell approved some methodology where they would get, a tagged tree would get more attention. and I talked to your chair about it, and she said this was all good. So we're gonna start that process if the district is up next month, but it's basically a method of how we can get the town, if we could get them a picture, we know the address, how can we get the town's attention quickly? And maybe conservation can give their okay very quickly, because obviously if it's a dangerous tree, we want to tag it. So
Okay,
I'm
I
gonna,
haven't seen it on our agenda, but maybe. it
no,
is.
it was one of those things I saw her at a meeting and I said, this is what I was thinking. And she said, it sounded great. So when I discuss it with the fire district, just know it's contingent on, obviously, your committee is going to weigh in before we get back to the town on it.
Okay. That reminds me that maybe I should just fill in the gaps on the whole question of Conservation Committee feedback to the request from this committee for comments on the ordinance, draft fire ordinances. So at our last meeting, Craig suggested that the subcommittee I'm on report out to Conservation, our subcommittee report on the ordinances. I did that at our last meeting, which took place a week after this committee's last meeting. And what we decided was that I would reach out to Dawn to see whether it was okay for me to release that report. And that's when Dawn responded to me, well, there's no point because, you know, we have shelved that. And so Conservation, the subcommittee made the decision to not move ahead with that. It is moot now, and we certainly will weigh in on the next draft.
Well, be prepared because you'll have 60 days. So, yeah.
Well, also it's groundwork. I just want to thank you for doing
Yes.
that, right? Like,
Yes.
because all of these issues, I think we have to hit them time and time again. And so that was time well invested.
Oh, for sure.
And
Yeah.
I just appreciate the work you do.
Yeah. And that's why I asked John whether or not they want questions or if they want track changes like we
Right.
did before, because I don't know what's most useful. And it seems from the process that's taken place so far, actually both might be useful. So,
Right.
you know, it almost makes me wonder, and I know when we get to the home hardening committee, and which is going to have a new name, it almost seems like we need a little subcommittee with Nona and one, either MJ or D. I'm just kind of thinking this at the top of my head. There's a whole question of what are we going to tell residents? Because this is going to happen. And people need to start talking about how they're going to start working on the perimeter of their property, and we want them to do it properly. And it just seems like, do we know what that message is? I mean, we have the great handouts from your committee. Is that enough? Or do we need something more flexible? It's just a thought because the three of you can't form a subcommittee. It can only be 2 people. So when we get this, so we're moving on now. So we're moving on to home hardening and vegetation management subcommittee. You guys might want to think about, do you have everything you need to educate residents, and what else do we need from conservation, and how do we get it? Does that make sense? Does any of what I just said make sense?
can I
Yeah.
just throw in something? So something we have talked about, I think in the last meeting, maybe Craig suggested that we have people who go out from this committee or other committees to advise residents. So, oh, that should be a priority, and this should be, and this is what we've learned. And then we also talked about having sort of open yards rather than open houses where people can see how things have worked. And I guess one question I have about that is that a context. So let's say D opens her yard and says, you know, this is who did my yard. Right. Can an individual then recommend a contractor, even though the committee as a whole, it can't do it as committee members?
To propose, well, first of all, I've been thinking a lot this last month about participation on this committee, and you know, having a communication or outreach type, like we were considering calling ourselves a mitigation committee just because it's all encompassing. But truly, the Browns Act violation, I think, is a huge obstacle. I would so love to be able to talk to Nona and to be able to talk to you, but right now I can't. I mean, I'm so appreciative that I have MJ and that we have that conversation. And I'm not sure what happened to that. We were talking about whether this committee should be a Browns Act under that jurisdiction or not. But it's a huge burden and cumbersome. And I don't feel like I've been able to contribute or participate fully because of that. So I'm just throwing that out there as you know, I don't know what that would take to change this type of committee, but there is so much information, there's so much knowledge amongst the five of us. I would love to be able to talk fully and openly and at any time. So just putting that out there.
So where that is that I was part of the draft handbook for this new idea. Committees have weighed in whether they think they want to be Brown Act or non-Brown Act committees. And it's being reviewed. So we don't have to make a decision now. When it happens, we can make a decision. I would say that we would probably not be taking public comment on ordinances if we weren't a Brown Act committee, because we're not, maybe that's the reason right there to not become to not be a Brown Act committee. But so there's pros and cons.
Okay.
I would certainly love to be able to have small meetings and yeah. But for right now, I don't think it's an option to be a non-Brown Act committee until we get that handbook.
Okay.
Could I just throw in one more thing, which is that, you know, the committee structure in itself, but also Brown Act restrictions also increase the amount of time we need to review things like ordinances, because you have to report back to a committee and then the committee has to publicize it and then it has to get discussed in the next committee meeting. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it really stretches it out. And, you know, that's a good thing in terms of transparency, but it really means that we have to give ourselves a long runway for these.
So true.
things.
Is conservation going to be a non-Brown Act?
No, conservation is going to stay Brown Act.
Why? You have to because of the.
So the Conservation Committee actually has some roles in the city code. And so as a consequence, they have to be a Brown Act. So that they will continue. And I know we've talked about you guys continuing as a sort of a safety issue. One thing I wanted to add, just since I was out talking to them, is they're going to get legal language back on the Model D stuff like next week. And what I told them was, 60 days is the bare minimum, because at 60 days, the train has left the station. And sure, we'll get public comment and they'll look at it, but there's not going to be very many changes, because otherwise they got to go back to their attorneys and stuff. So I did suggest, like, on the perimeter stuff and just, getting that stuff out early, even if it's draft, will make a big difference. And I know that's the drumbeat you guys have been trying to do for a long time. So I will continue to reinforce that with them as well. But let's just continue, because I think, we really do have this good opportunity to work with them. And I think they are open. In fact, they came today and they're willing to continue to come. I think just great news all around.
So we could also split out vegetation management and home hardening into two different committees, and Nona and you could do vegetation, and MJ and you could do home hardening. Or at least, I mean, I don't know what
Let's
else
just
to
think
do.
about it. Let's table
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I mean, it's. We could also get if we could get more members, we could have 3 people on the subcommittee.
Is Robert Young a member?
No.
Okay. Because that was
That
on
should
the,
be off my agenda.
it's not.
Yes,
still,
it is. Yes, I took him off.
I saw him somewhere.
You know what?
I forgot the name for that.
I think he's listed on
Yeah.
the website.
It's on the website.
On
It's
our-
somewhere.
Oh, that wasn't there the last time I looked at the website, so somebody stuck it in.
Maybe he wants to join. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
think
if
so.
we could drum up another couple members, we could up our count to 7.
All right.
That would be great. Okay. We could, no. that's not gonna- Okay, so we're in home hardening and vegetation management. So do you want to propose a new name?
We're okay with that?
With mitigation?
Yeah, we thought, you know,
Mitigation and outreach or just mitigation?
mitigation,
Just
you know,
mitigation.
home hardening, and vegetation management.
It's
I
so
get
long and
tired
wordy.
of writing it,
Yeah.
so.
And you're the
Mitigation,
secretary. That's right. Exactly.
you know, that's a good idea. but
How about we
the-
propose that we're the mitigation committee?
Yeah, and also to just focus on our, or sort of restate our charter as focusing on outreach and checklists to educate and encourage residents to mitigate their properties and increase wildfire resilience of their communities. So,
I like it.
And I want to point out, we have a hefty chunk of budget left. We do. We have like $5,000 or $6,000 or something. If you wanted to do a mailing, we might even have more. Yeah. Yeah, we could do a mailing. Well, we just got the budget approved, so and I don't think we're going to be doing another fair. So, you know,
I think we're gonna need to do an education. I think the residents are a lot less aware than you guys realize. Like, checking my neighbors, they are all, most of my neighbors would flunk the rules, and most of them don't know it, and most of them don't know that all of this is coming in.
yeah, that's why I'm saying that
It's gonna have to be, I think, besides just getting people out to residents, we need to do some little events. We need to think about it.
that sounds good. The department, oh, you mean the fire district?
Yeah,
okay, and that will be up to MJ and D. I do want to also say under this home hardening, I think it's under this, Nona had mentioned the PG&E not cutting the trees, and should we get Howard in? And I did contact Howard. And as far as he's concerned, he sent me that PG&E is continuing to do the tree trimming here. There's no difference in Patola Valley. He really didn't have anything else to offer. He said not a concern as far as he was concerned. So I did check on that. And then, so we're going to talk about our agenda next month, but I kicked off, we had a great question from a resident on decking who was concerned about, he didn't quite understand what materials he could use on a deck. And I know Dee is going to reach out to him, but I did want to put it on the agenda next month because I just think it's a topic that so many people are interested in. And I'd like on the website under, you know, MJ's list of topics, go to this YouTube video at, you know, 20 minutes and we discuss decking because I do think that I know myself with wooden decks, it's a big issue with a lot of people.
Yeah, what Dee and I had suggested before she went away for a few weeks back, and it was all, you know, necessary. But we were going to go through the state's building materials list because it lists all this decking, and we were going to go through and tell people, yeah, you could use this one or not that one, because it's just not possible for a regular person to figure it out.
Right. Absolutely.
And when I say we, I really mean Dee.
Well, and then you present it and then on the website, we have that resources we can say. So it's like a mini wildfire fair. You can click on that YouTube video and you can see a presentation and you have your questions in.
So do you want to do that for next month?
Sure.
And we'll work on it.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Any,
Oh, do we have to get our names? Too? Do we have to
I
have a
don't
motion?
think
No,
so.
we
Do
don't have
I don't
to.
think we have to
We
vote on
can,
that.
we can make
Yeah.
our own.
Great, we're now the mitigation subcommittee.
So any questions for the mitigation committee? So finance and insurance subcommittee.
Here is a CBI seminar on the 28th, and I think MJ signed up for it, right? The insurance seminar.
Oh, you mean last month? or something? I forget.
Anyway, it's upcoming on the 28th. I can't make any long-term commitments.
No.
Everything's sort of day to day with me. I will try to log on, or I can't go anywhere right now. But I can see if I can get on. They're going to be talking about the way they figure out catastrophic insurance coverage. I suspect there will be a lot more being talked about because of all of the insurance changes
Oh,
and the non-renewals that are happening and that sort of thing. So I don't have anything to say other than hopefully I'll have a report back from that.
Oh, okay. I forgot I told you about that. That's great. If you, I mean, you can watch the webinar afterwards.
hoping.
You don't have to watch it live, but it can't. I did watch one from last year and it did go 4 hours.
You know, but when they're recorded, you can put pause and get up and walk around.
This one,
Anyway, that's my update.
There just doesn't seem to be any movement on the insurance front
You're well.
as far as,
Might know more next week.
yeah, as far as all the things we hope for, I don't see a lot of those discounts coming.
Yeah, well, the politicians want to be heroes, so we'll see what they can pull off.
Okay, any questions for the finance and insurance subcommittee? Okay. All right, so quorum check for next meeting. Is everyone on? D, you're okay? And then the following meeting, yes, Nona? No, we should be good. And then, wait a minute, we're going to discuss agenda for next month. I just want to ask, so John Morgan did offer to come to talk about D-Space, but I mean, it would be really interesting to hear him. However, I would kind of also like to get on the communication agenda and really talk about what we want to do over the next 6 months as far as,
I would agree, especially since Don said they pretty much have everything except for that appendix anyway. Like it's not that we're not going to be going through the whole Model D, right? So I think us working on our communications and our topics would probably be more effective.
so maybe I'll come with ideas of what we think. And also I'm gonna spend some time looking at the town websites because there's EPC has some stuff on wildfire and conservation, and then there's the town emergencies page, and then there's our page, and then there's the fire district, and there's just a lot of stuff in a lot of different places. So I'm gonna kind of maybe look at that.
that would be good.
So we want to really think big here on what we think we need to do to, why we're not getting through to residents. And then I do want to say that we had that great document a few months ago that I put in the package, and then we took a detour with the ordinances that MJ provided about, research into education and wildfire preparedness and what works, if you want to review that.
Sounds good.
Any comment from the audience? No? Okay, so it is.
So I have a comment. I would recommend that you wait to bring the Model D guy in until after you get the Model D. No, hear me out. So until you get the Model D from Don, so that you can look at what he's proposing. And then when John comes in, you could potentially ask questions against actual Don's Model D. So I think you might get a richer conversation. So
At this point, we're not bringing him in. we said we were going to talk about communication next
for
month.
the next agenda, but you were also talking about bringing him in at some point, and I was suggesting that bringing him in after you get something from Don would probably be the right sort of order.
I don't actually, I mean, I would be incredibly interesting to attend one of his seminars, but I don't really think that it would be very useful to this committee. Okay, so it is 5:55 and we're going to close that meeting. That, somebody want to make a motion?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Okay. Yes. Good votes. Okay, unanimous. Okay, thank you, ladies.
Thank you all.
Good meeting, good meeting. Denona, you're going to tell your chair about the tree tagging. Just remind her that's coming. I don't want her to think nothing will happen. It's just a question of it's just a question of figuring out how we're going to get the picture to everybody.
I think we have to do it here.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good.